There's a book in the third library whose cover is made of black glass. When you open it, no words appear. Only your own face, distorted by candlelight, surrounded by every person you blame, every situation you resist, every pattern you swear has nothing to do with you. Most readers close it immediately. They came seeking a secret law, not a reflection. But the glass book does not accuse. It reveals. Reality is not always a wall in front of you. Sometimes it is a mirror held so close to your face that you call it the world because you cannot bear to call it yourself. For most of your life, you were taught a particular story about how reality works. The story goes like this. Events happen outside of you, independent of you, and your only role is to respond to them. The world moves first. You react second, and the quality of your life is determined largely by the quality of the circumstances that fall upon you. This is the architecture of the ordinary mind, and it sounds reasonable. It sounds responsible. It sounds like maturity. But it is also the architecture of permanent limitation. The deepest flaw in this belief is not that it is entirely wrong. It is that it is profoundly incomplete. Events do occur, people do act, circumstances do arrive uninvited. No honest metaphysical teaching denies the reality of external forces. But what the ordinary story omits, what it quietly and consistently refuses to examine, is the invisible layer beneath the event, the signal that was already broadcasting before the event arrived, the assumption that prepared the ground for what grew there. Consider this. You have met people whose entire lives seem to be defined by a single recurring theme. One person is always being betrayed. Another is always being overlooked. A third is always working harder than everyone around them and receiving less. You may know these people. You may be one of them. And the honest question, the one most people resist, is this. If reality were truly random, why does the same pattern keep finding the same person? The common answer is luck, or karma in its most misunderstood form, or simply bad timing, or the cruelty of an indifferent universe. But the deeper answer, the one that the glass book holds open on its reflective page, is this. Patterns are not accidents. They are not punishments. They are communications. And the frequency from which they emerge lives inside the person experiencing them. Here is where most teachings collapse into something dangerous. They hear the word reflection, and they turn it into a verdict. They hear that the inner world influences the outer world, and they conclude that every bad thing that has ever happened to you is your fault. This is not what the mirror protocol teaches. This is not what the glass book reveals. That interpretation is itself a distortion. It is the mirror being used as a weapon instead of a tool. The distinction is precise and it matters enormously. The mirror does not say you deserve your suffering. The mirror does not say you created your abuse, your illness, your loss, or your grief. What the mirror says is far more subtle and far more useful. It says, your inner state, your unconscious assumptions, your dominant emotional frequency, your unexamined beliefs about what you are worth and what you are safe to receive. These are active signals. And reality, which functions as a living feedback system, responds to those signals over time. Think of a tuning fork. When you strike a tuning fork, every other tuning fork in the room that shares its frequency begins to vibrate in response. It does not matter whether the other tuning forks intended to respond. It does not matter whether they are near or far, friendly or hostile. The resonance is automatic. The matching is a function of physics. Now, extend this metaphor to consciousness. If the deepest frequency you carry is a belief that you are not safe to be seen, you will find yourself surrounded by situations in which you are overlooked, diminished, or made invisible, not because the world has conspired against you, but because your signal and those circumstances share a frequency. This is not blame. This is literacy. Learning to read the mirror is not about assigning fault. It is about developing the ability to see the invisible transmission beneath the visible event. The moment you learn to do this, you stop being a passive receiver of reality and you become an active reader of it. And a reader who understands the text can eventually begin to revise the manuscript. The false belief also carries a second layer. Even people who have accepted that thoughts influence reality often make this secondary error. They believe they can think their way into a new reflection while leaving the deeper assumption untouched. They write affirmations on mirrors. They visualize success. They repeat that they are worthy, that they are abundant, that they are loved. But the external pattern does not shift. And they conclude with a despair that hollows the chest that they must be defective, that the law does not work for them. The error is not in the practice. The error is in the level at which the practice is aimed. The spoken affirmation lives at the surface layer of the mind. The assumption being mirrored lives at the identity layer, which is far deeper. It is the floor of the subconscious, not the ceiling. And painting the ceiling a new color does not change the foundation beneath your feet. The protocol in this codex works at the level where the actual signal originates. There is also a third element of the false belief that must be addressed before the real teaching can begin. Many people approach the idea of the mirror and immediately begin scanning other people to identify what those others must be projecting. They become diagnosticians of everyone else's reflection. They use the teaching as a lens for other people's flaws while remaining completely opaque to their own. This is one of the most sophisticated forms of avoidance ever developed. The glass book has a single orientation. It faces inward. It cannot be turned to face another person without losing its power entirely. The false belief, in its full form, is this: that reality is an external phenomenon happening to a passive self, that patterns are random or cosmically assigned, that the inner world and the outer world exist in separate chambers with no corridor between them. This codex collapses that belief, not to burden you, not to condemn you, but because you cannot navigate a language you believe does not exist. And reality, as this library has always maintained, is a language. Your life is not a sentence handed to you. It is a text that you are, right now, actively writing at a level beneath your waking awareness. The work of this codex is to bring that deeper writing process into consciousness, to teach you to recognize the signal you are transmitting, to show you how to read what your life is reflecting, and to give you a precise method for revising the inner assumption so that the outer pattern can finally, genuinely, and durably change. This codex will open in 5 chambers. Each chamber holds a different portion of the mirror protocol, and each one is necessary before the next can be fully understood. You will not be rushed. You will not be given a list of steps and sent on your way. This is an archive. It is designed to be absorbed at the pace of genuine comprehension. In the first chamber, you have already begun to hear the signal. You have felt the false belief begin to loosen. That loosening is not accident. It is preparation. The mind, when it encounters a genuine teaching, opens before it knows it has done so. Something in you recognized the glass book before I described it. In the second chamber, you will be given the hidden mechanism. You will learn what the mirror principle actually is at the level of attention, assumption, identity, and circumstance. You will understand why the pattern keeps returning, what sustains it beneath consciousness, and what must shift before the reflection can change. In the third chamber, you will enter the diagnostic mirror. This is where the teaching becomes personal. You will learn to recognize how the mirror pattern appears in your specific life, in your repeated conflicts, your recurring emotional states, your relationships, your financial experiences, and the invisible beliefs those patterns are communicating. In the fourth chamber, the protocol itself will be laid out, not as inspiration, not as philosophy, but as a precise, sequential method you can apply to any area of your life where a pattern has repeated itself long enough to be called a signature. You will learn to identify, name, locate, revise, and observe. Those 5 movements form the core of the mirror protocol. In the fifth and final chamber, you will return to the place where this journey began. But you will not return as the person who first arrived at the glass book's threshold. The mirror will still be there, but you will no longer close it. The mirror protocol does not promise you an easier life. It promises you a readable one, a life that you can navigate with precision because you can finally see the signal beneath the circumstance. A life where rejection becomes information, delay becomes direction, conflict becomes communication, and every recurring pattern becomes a doorway rather than a wall. You will also receive, throughout this codex, specific warnings. There are ways to misuse this teaching. There are distortions that look like wisdom but function like traps. The glass book has edges. A reader who does not understand its edges will cut themselves and call the book dangerous. The archive will show you where those edges are. Before this codex goes further, one more thing must be said. If this language feels like a language you have been waiting to hear, if the idea of reality as a communication system resonates somewhere beneath your ordinary thinking, then you are in the right library. Subscribe to the third library. There are more codices waiting to be opened, and each one was placed in this archive for exactly the reader who finds it. The mirror principle is not a modern invention. It is not a product of contemporary self-help culture, not a rebranding of positive thinking, and not a simplified metaphor for psychological projection alone. It is an ancient observation about the relationship between consciousness and circumstance, one that appears across cultures, across centuries, and across traditions that had no contact with each other, yet arrived at strikingly similar conclusions. When separate archives all contain the same manuscript, the archivist pays attention. The principle, at its most fundamental level, states this: consciousness does not merely observe reality. Consciousness participates in shaping the reality it observes, not through magic, not through wishful thinking, but through something far more architectural, the filter of assumption. Every human being carries, at the level of identity, a set of deeply held assumptions about what is real, what is possible, what they are, and what the world is. These assumptions are not opinions, they are not preferences, they are something closer to structural definitions. They define the shape of the lens through which all experience is filtered, interpreted, and ultimately attracted or repelled. An assumption is not a thought you choose consciously. An assumption is a belief that has become so embedded in the subconscious architecture that it no longer presents itself as a belief. It presents itself as a fact, as simply the way things are. This is what makes the mirror so difficult to read. You are not looking at a belief when you look at your life. You are looking at what your deepest self has concluded is an immovable truth about reality. And the mirror reflects that conclusion back to you again and again in 100 different costumes. The law operates through 3 primary movements. The first movement is attention. Whatever a person consistently and emotionally attends to, they amplify in their perceptual field. This is not metaphysics divorced from observable experience. The human nervous system is a filtering system of staggering complexity. In any given moment, it receives an enormous volume of sensory and emotional input. Out of that volume, it selects what to register consciously, based largely on what the subconscious has flagged as significant. Significance is determined by identity, by what the deep self believes is relevant to its own story. The second movement is assumption. Once attention is directed by the subconscious identity, assumption determines interpretation. 2 people can stand in the same room, witness the same event, and walk away with opposite conclusions about what happened. This is not a malfunction. This is the mirror operating normally. Each person's assumption filtered the event through its own lens and returned a version of it that confirmed what was already believed. The third movement is circumstance. Circumstance in this model is not random. It is not entirely controlled either. But circumstance is porous to the signal that attention and assumption project. Over time, the kinds of situations a person consistently encounters, the types of people who keep appearing, the quality of what keeps arriving, these reflect with extraordinary precision the frequency of the assumptions broadcasting from within. This is why the pattern repeats. Not because life is cruel, not because you are cursed, but because the signal has not changed. The station is still broadcasting the same frequency, and the external world, functioning as a receiver, keeps returning the same kind of transmission. Until the internal signal is revised, the outer pattern will not fundamentally shift. It may rearrange its furniture, it may change its surface appearance, but the essential experience, the emotional signature of what keeps happening, will remain recognizable. Think of it this way. Imagine a radio operator who does not know they are operating a radio. They have been broadcasting on the same frequency for years. They receive only the kinds of transmissions that match their frequency. Other transmissions pass through the air around them, but they never register. The operator, not understanding the mechanism, begins to believe that only one kind of transmission exists. They conclude that the world simply does not send anything else. This is the condition of the unread mirror. The signal is invisible to the sender. Now introduce the concept of identity. Identity in this framework is not your name, your history, or your personality as others describe it. Identity in the mirror protocol is the collection of assumptions your subconscious treats as definitions of self. I am the kind of person who is always left. I am the kind of person who cannot trust others with my real self. I am the kind of person for whom money is always a source of strain. These are not conscious thoughts. They live beneath the surface, embedded in the nervous system, rehearsed not in language, but in emotional tone, in the posture of the body, in the micro-decisions made every day without deliberation. These identity-level assumptions are the authors of the signal. When your assumption says, at the deepest layer, that you are not safe to be seen, your attention is automatically directed toward evidence of being overlooked. Your interpretation of ambiguous events automatically confirms the belief. and the circumstances that you draw toward you over time begin to carry the pattern of that confirmation. The reflection is astonishingly precise. The mirror law also includes what might be called the principle of matching intensity. The emotional charge attached to an assumption determines the strength of its signal. A belief held with mild intellectual curiosity will produce a mild signal. A belief held with intense emotional conviction, particularly one woven through with fear, shame, grief, or longing, broadcasts at a high amplitude. The stronger the emotional charge attached to the assumption, the more consistently and vividly it appears in the external pattern. This is why the things you most need to read in the mirror are often the things that most disturb you when others point them out. The intensity of your defensiveness is frequently proportional to the depth of the belief being reflected. The archivist notes this not to shame you, but because it is a precise and useful diagnostic. When something in your reflection provokes an unusually strong reaction, that reaction is the glass book turning its most illuminated page. Now, the mirror principle does not operate on a single moment. It is not a vending machine where a corrected thought immediately produces a corrected circumstance. It operates over the medium and long term, the way a ship's heading determines its destination not after 1 degree of adjustment, but after miles of sustained new direction. The signal you broadcast today begins to shift what you encounter over days, weeks, and months. The deeper the assumption being revised, the longer the external environment takes to reorganize in response. Impatience is itself a signal worth reading. There is also what this codex calls the echo chamber effect. When an assumption has been active for a very long time, it has constructed a kind of architecture around itself. The relationships you have formed, the environments you inhabit, the habits you maintain. All of these carry traces of the old signal. They are the physical residue of the frequency you have been broadcasting. When you begin to revise the internal assumption, these existing structures initially resist. They push back. They attempt to maintain the familiar frequency. This is why change often feels like conflict before it feels like freedom. The law beneath the event is not a law of punishment. It is a law of correspondence. Inner and outer are in continuous correspondence. They speak to each other across a threshold that most people never learn to locate. The glass book is positioned precisely at that threshold, and it faces both ways. It shows you the inner signal by letting you read the outer pattern. Understanding this law at an intellectual level is the beginning, but intellectual understanding is not where the law operates. The law operates at the identity level, at the assumption layer, below where most people direct their attention during spiritual practice. This codex will eventually give you a method for reaching that layer directly. For now, the most important movement is recognition. To begin to see that the pattern in your external life is not random. It is readable. And a readable pattern can be understood. And an understood pattern can be changed. There is one final element of this law that must be stated before moving forward. The mirror does not only reflect what you fear, it reflects what you assume about all of it. Love, worthiness, power, safety, visibility, abundance. If your deepest assumption about love is that it eventually leaves, the mirror will show you experiences of departure. If your deepest assumption about success is that it requires the destruction of your peace, the mirror will show you a life where achievement and exhaustion arrive as a pair. The full range of human experience passes through the filter of assumption, not only the painful parts. This means the protocol does not only address what is broken, it addresses the full architecture of what you believe is real. And when that architecture is revised at the foundation, the reflection that returns is not merely less painful. It becomes something you could not have imagined from within the old signal. The mirror can show you that too, when you learn to hold it without flinching. What you are about to study is not a philosophy. It is a mechanism. A living, operating, precise mechanism that runs beneath the surface of every day of your life, whether you are aware of it or not. The archive does not offer you this knowledge so that you may admire it from a distance. The glass book was written to be used. Every recurring pattern in your life is a page in that book. Every repeating emotion is a sentence. Every persistent conflict is a chapter heading. And every time you have felt that reality was somehow speaking to you, somehow trying to get your attention through the same kind of event, showing up in a slightly different disguise, you were right. It was. And now you are learning to read. The most common reason people fail to read the mirror is that they are looking in the wrong direction. When an external event triggers pain, the gaze moves outward toward the person or situation that caused the discomfort. The gaze fixes on the surface of the event rather than on what the event is illuminating beneath the surface. This is not a character flaw. It is an almost universal default of the human nervous system, which is wired to scan the environment for threat and to assign the source of pain to the nearest visible cause. The nearest visible cause is always more convincing than an invisible internal signal. You can point to it, you can describe it to someone else and have them confirm it. The external story has witnesses, the internal signal has none. And so the mind, which craves certainty and social confirmation, defaults to the story it can prove. The boss was unfair. The partner was dismissive. The opportunity vanished without reason. The world keeps producing the same kind of difficulty, and the mind catalogs these events as evidence of external reality rather than as feedback from the internal signal. Blame is not stupidity. It is a deeply embedded protective mechanism. When something in the external world causes pain, blaming that external thing creates a temporary boundary between the self and the source of harm. It says, the fault is there, not here. The mirror is dangerous. It demands the self to remain in the seat of responsibility. And responsibility, when confused with guilt, feels unbearable. Most people have not been taught the distinction between being responsible for a signal and being guilty of a crime. Because no one made that distinction clear, responsibility and guilt fused into a single unbearable sensation. And the mirror, which offers only the former, gets refused because it feels like the latter. Shame operates as an even deeper obstruction than blame. Where blame points outward, shame points inward, but in the wrong way. Shame does not say, here is a signal I can read and revise. Shame says, the signal itself proves that I am fundamentally defective. A person operating under shame cannot use the mirror as a tool because they experience every reflection as a verdict. They look into the glass book, and instead of seeing information, they see confirmation of their own brokenness. This causes them to either close the book immediately or to use it as a weapon against themselves, which is one of the most dangerous distortions of the mirror protocol. There is also a more sophisticated obstruction that appears in people who are already intellectually engaged with metaphysical ideas. This obstruction is called spiritual literalism. The spiritually literal reader hears the principle that the outer reflects the inner and immediately applies it mechanically. They draw a straight causal line between a single thought and a single event. They decide that because they felt anxious on Tuesday, they caused the conflict on Wednesday. When the conflict does not cease, after they choose to feel calmer, they conclude either that the law is false or that they have failed at it. Both conclusions are wrong. The law operates at the identity level, not the thought level. A single conscious thought does not revise an identity assumption. Defensiveness is the fourth major obstruction, and it is particularly relevant to the mirror work, because the mirror often reflects the beliefs a person is most attached to defending. When a person's deep assumption is that they are someone who works hard and deserves more than they receive, any suggestion that their circumstances reflect an internal pattern will be experienced as an attack on their integrity. They are not wrong to feel this way. The accusation, if badly framed, is an attack. But the mirror itself is not an accusation. It is a diagnostic. The defensive reader cannot access that distinction because the sting of perceived blame has already closed the channel. There is a related phenomenon that might be called pattern immunity. This occurs when a person has lived inside a particular pattern for so long that they have entirely normalized it. They no longer experience the pattern as a pattern. They experience it as life. Everyone they know has similar experiences. Every conversation they have reinforces the framework. Their entire social world has been unconsciously selected to confirm the signal they are broadcasting. When the mirror is introduced, they do not recognize what is being reflected because they have never stood far enough outside the pattern to see it as a pattern rather than as reality. Literal thinking is another barrier. The literal mind insists that events mean exactly what they appear to mean on the surface. A job loss means a bad economy or a difficult employer. A failed relationship means the wrong partner was chosen. A financial setback means that money is scarce and the world is difficult. The literal mind is not wrong about the surface facts, but it stops at the surface and builds its entire understanding of life there. It does not ask what the pattern beneath the surface might be transmitting. It treats the map as the territory and then wonders why the territory never changes. There is also what the archive calls the single event fallacy. Many people who encounter the idea of the mirror apply it only to extreme or dramatic events. They look for the mirror in crises, in major losses, in acute confrontations. But the mirror speaks most clearly through the everyday pattern of small, repeated experiences. The same slight feeling of being talked over in every meeting. The same quiet sense of not quite belonging in every social situation. The same particular flavor of financial anxiety that shows up whenever abundance seems close. These micro-patterns are where the signal broadcasts most consistently. The single event reader misses them entirely. The failure to distinguish between timing and reflection is another common misreading. Sometimes an external event is a signal about timing, not about identity. Sometimes a delay is a delay. Sometimes a door is closed because the corridor leads somewhere better, not because the person's assumption needs revision. The untrained reader applies the mirror universally and without discernment, concluding that every obstacle is self-created and every delay is a personal failure. This is not mirror work. This is self-punishment wearing a metaphysical costume. Perhaps the most pervasive misreading of all, and the one with the most serious consequences, is the confusion of cause and level. When the mirror principle is misunderstood as operating at the level of conscious thought, A person concludes that if they simply think better thoughts, their life will immediately reorganize. And when it does not, they conclude that they are doing something wrong, that they are broken, or that the principle is false. The real operating level is the identity assumption, which is the layer below conscious thought. Changing what you consciously think while leaving the underlying assumption intact is like painting a window to look like sunlight while the sun outside is still absent. The mirror is also frequently misread by those who have experienced genuine trauma, genuine injustice, or genuine external harm. These individuals have a particularly important relationship with the concept of reflection, and the mirror protocol must be applied to them with the utmost care and precision. The archive will address this specifically and at length in the section on false signals and distortions. For now, it is sufficient to say this: the mirror does not erase the reality of what others have done. It is not a tool for excusing harm. It is a tool for reclaiming agency over the one layer of reality over which you genuinely have power: your own inner signal. The final and perhaps most quietly destructive misreading is the use of the mirror as entertainment rather than practice. Some people engage with the idea of reflection as a fascinating intellectual concept. They enjoy discussing it. They understand it theoretically. They can explain it with sophistication, and they never once apply it to themselves with genuine rigor. The glass book, opened in this way, reveals nothing because the reader is not actually looking. They are performing the act of looking while keeping their real assumptions completely undisturbed. The archive knows this reader well. This codex is not written for their comfort. It is written to interrupt that performance. Consider the experience of recurring criticism. A person moves through multiple environments over the course of their life: different jobs, different relationships, different social circles. And in each environment, at different times through different voices and different specific complaints, a single theme keeps surfacing. They are told they are too much, or they are told they are too distant, or they are told that they are difficult to reach emotionally. The specific words change. The people delivering them change, but the essential shape of the criticism does not. Most people, when they encounter this pattern, conclude that they have been unlucky in their choice of companions. The glass book offers a different reading. When criticism follows a person across environments and relationships, it is not the critics who are the message. The critics are the messenger. The message is something the internal signal is broadcasting that keeps drawing the same quality of feedback. In many cases, the person receiving this criticism carries a deep assumption about themselves that the criticism seems to confirm. They believed before the criticism arrived that they were too much or too little or unreachable. The criticism is not creating that belief. The criticism is echoing it back from the outside world. The signal was already broadcasting. The critic simply tuned into it. Now consider abandonment. There is a person who has experienced in multiple relationships the same essential departure. Partners leave, friendships dissolve, professional collaborations end without satisfying closure, and always the departure carries the same emotional signature: the feeling of being left before they were ready to let go. This person may spend years analyzing the specific reasons each relationship ended, but the archivist notices something different. The archivist notices the emotional frequency that was active before each departure. In many cases, a person who consistently experiences abandonment carries an assumption that departure is inevitable. This assumption does not wait for evidence. It begins operating at the start of every relationship. It manifests as a particular kind of preemptive emotional distance, or as an intensity of attachment so concentrated that it places enormous pressure on the other person, or as a hypervigilance that reads ordinary ambiguity as early signs of the dreaded ending. Each of these behaviors is a broadcast, and the broadcast, without being consciously intended, creates the conditions that make departure more likely. The assumption manufactures its own confirmation. Money stress is one of the most universally recognized recurring patterns, and it is one of the most instructive examples of mirror work in practice. There is a specific financial pattern that returns across different income levels, different life stages, different careers. A person earns more money, and somehow the stress does not decrease. The financial pressure simply reorganizes itself at the new level. The amounts change. The essential anxiety remains. This person may work with financial planners. They may increase their income dramatically. But the feeling persists because the pattern is not about money. It is about the assumption that safety and sufficiency are always slightly out of reach. The subconscious assumption about money operates like a thermostat. When a person's identity-level belief establishes that a certain level of financial anxiety is normal, the subconscious will consistently work to maintain that level. When income increases, expenses increase to match it. When expenses decrease, something unexpected arrives to restore the familiar strain. This is not the universe punishing prosperity. It is the identity signal regulating its experience back to its definition of normal. The mirror is showing the person their financial self-concept, not their financial circumstances. Recurring conflict is among the most dramatic and convincing reflections the mirror produces, and it is also among the most difficult to accept, precisely because conflict always has another person in it. When you are in a conflict, the other person is real. Their behavior is real. Their impact is real. And the mirror protocol does not deny any of this. But notice something that becomes visible only when you step back from the immediate heat of the conflict. The type of conflict you keep having. Not the surface subject, not who said what, but the essential dynamic underneath. Some people repeatedly find themselves in conflicts about being controlled. Others repeatedly find themselves in conflicts about not being heard. Others find themselves consistently in dynamics where they carry more than their share of responsibility, and the other person does not notice. These dynamics are not produced by bad luck in the selection of other people. They are frequencies. The person who always ends up in control dynamics broadcasts a signal about control, usually a belief about safety and autonomy that was formed very early. The mirror keeps returning that signal until it is read. Authority is one of the most revealing categories of mirror work, because our relationship with authority figures is so often a transmission from a much earlier time. Consider someone who consistently encounters authority figures who are unreasonable, dismissive, or punishing. Each specific authority figure is a different person. Each situation has its own context and its own justification. But the essential dynamic repeats. The person in power is experienced as withholding, critical, or unsafe. This pattern is rarely about the specific bosses or institutions encountered. It is almost always a reflection of an earlier authority template, one usually formed in childhood, that the subconscious has been broadcasting as its baseline expectation ever since. The authority mirror is particularly interesting because it is so thoroughly externalized. A person who has an unresolved relationship with early authority will often present themselves as someone to whom authorities are simply always difficult. They have stories, each one completely accurate at the surface level, to support this conclusion. The pattern feels like an external fact. It is, in reality, an internal frequency meeting its match in the external world over and over again, until the frequency is located, named, and revised. Admiration is a mirror pattern that is far less often discussed, yet it is one of the most illuminating. When you consistently admire someone for a quality, when you are drawn to a particular attribute in others with a feeling that is deeper than ordinary appreciation, when you find yourself repeatedly around people who embody a specific kind of power, grace, creativity, or freedom, the glass book asks you to notice something. The thing you most admire in another person is almost always a quality that exists within you, but has not yet been given permission to emerge. The admiration mirror works because the subconscious does not consistently draw your attention to what is foreign to you. It draws your attention toward what is latent in you but suppressed by the assumption that it is not yours to claim. When you find yourself in the presence of someone who speaks with open confidence and you feel not merely appreciation, but a particular ache, that ache is the signal. It is the voice of a self that exists in you, constrained by a belief that such expression is not safe or not permitted. There is a woman who finds herself constantly in relationships with emotionally unavailable partners. She is warm, present, communicative, and has done considerable work on herself. She cannot understand why the same pattern returns wearing different faces. Through the mirror protocol, she begins to examine not what the partners did, but what was active in her before each relationship began. She discovers a belief, not consciously held but precisely legible in the pattern, that receiving full emotional presence from another person is somehow dangerous, that to be fully met is to be fully exposed, and that exposure at the level of the deep identity is associated with an old wound in which being fully seen preceded abandonment. The unavailable partner, counterintuitively, was the safe choice, because the unavailability prevented the dangerous intimacy. The mirror was not showing her their pattern, it was showing her the belief that kept choosing theirs. There is a man who has spent 15 years in a particular profession and has consistently been passed over for advancement. He is highly competent. His colleagues acknowledge this. His superiors acknowledge this. And yet, promotion after promotion goes to people he believes are less qualified. He has left 2 organizations, certain the problem was with those institutions. The third produces the same pattern. Through the mirror protocol, he identifies an assumption he has never consciously articulated, that visible success invites scrutiny, and scrutiny will reveal an inadequacy he has been concealing. He does not want to be invisible, but some part of him has decided that invisibility is safer than the exposure that follows being fully seen in his power. He has been unconsciously signaling for the ceiling that protects him. The mirror was not being cruel to him, it was being precise. Consider the pattern of creative blocks, a writer who cannot finish anything, a musician who abandons every project before completion, a visual artist who produces beautiful beginnings and then withdraws. This pattern, which the person experiencing it often explains as perfectionism or distraction or lack of time, is rarely about any of those surface explanations. The mirror reveals a belief about what completion means. In many cases, completing the creative work means releasing it into a world that may reject it. And the subconscious, which has associated rejection with a particular kind of pain, has quietly decided that incompletion is preferable to exposure. The block is not an absence of ability. It is a protection. The mirror shows the person not their limitation, but their assumption about what visibility costs. Financial windfalls that disappear immediately. Opportunities that arrive and are somehow not acted upon. Relationships that begin with extraordinary promise and dissolve before they fully form. Repeated illnesses or physical collapses that arrive precisely when something significant is about to shift. These are all patterns that carry signal. Not all of them are purely internal in origin, but all of them contain a layer of inner world transmission worth reading. The glass book does not claim to explain every circumstance. It offers to illuminate the portion of every circumstance that originates in the signal you are broadcasting, so that portion at least can be understood and revised. What is recognizable in all of these examples is the emotional signature. The feeling that arrives is consistent even when the circumstances are not. The particular quality of helplessness or striving or longing or resentment or hunger or exhaustion that keeps showing up beneath the surface of very different events, this is the signal's fingerprint. Learning to recognize that fingerprint is the beginning of reading the mirror with genuine competence. When you feel that specific emotional signature arriving again, in a new situation through a new face, you will begin to recognize it not as fate, but as a familiar broadcast. And recognition is where the protocol begins. The pattern does not announce itself. It does not knock on a door and introduce itself as a recurring mechanism deserving of your attention. The pattern arrives in costume. It wears a new face each time. It inhabits a new situation with its own particular details, its own surface story, its own cast of characters who are entirely real and entirely responsible for their own behavior. And because the costume changes, the pattern goes unrecognized for years, sometimes for an entire lifetime. The first way the pattern appears is through repeated emotional experience. Not the same event, but the same feeling. Different circumstances, same emotional signature. A person might feel a particular quality of smallness in a meeting at work, then feel the exact same quality of smallness at a family dinner, then feel it again in a conversation with a stranger who says something offhand. The situations could not be more different. The feeling is identical. This is the signal identifying itself through its own frequency. The emotion is not the problem. It is the fingerprint. The second way the pattern appears is through recurring character types. You notice, looking back across your history of relationships and encounters, that a particular type of person keeps appearing. Not always someone you chose to be close to. Sometimes they are assigned to you, a manager, a neighbor, a colleague you did not select. But the type is consistent, the charismatic but ultimately unreliable person, the one who makes you feel invisible, the one who needs saving, the one who undermines you while appearing to support you. These recurring types are not coincidences. They are the casting decisions of your internal signal, which tends to attract the exact category of person that matches its current broadcast. The third form of appearance is the repeated circumstantial theme. This is broader than a character type. It is a category of event that keeps showing up, always being the last to know. Always being included but never fully belonging, always being recognized for capability but not for humanity, always having enough but never quite enough, always being on the edge of the breakthrough that somehow does not complete. These circumstantial themes are less obvious than specific events, because they require the listener to look across a wide arc of time and resist the habit of treating each event as an isolated occurrence. The fourth form is through the emotional trigger. A trigger is a disproportionate emotional reaction to a present moment stimulus. The stimulus is present tense. The reaction is drawing on something much older. When a tone of voice from a partner produces a reaction that feels far larger than the situation warrants, the mirror is pointing. When a minor professional slight produces a wave of shame or rage that seems to come from a place deeper than the moment, the mirror is pointing. The trigger is not the pattern itself. It is the alarm system indicating that a pattern-related signal is active. Projection is the fifth and perhaps most instructive form of pattern appearance, and it is the one most immediately relevant to mirror work. Projection occurs when an inner state, particularly an unacknowledged one, is perceived as existing outside the self. The person who is terrified of their own anger sees anger everywhere in others. The person who carries deep shame about their ambition perceives others as greedy or power-hungry. The person who secretly fears their own mediocrity is particularly attuned to the mediocrity of everyone around them. What is projected outward was always interior. The mirror shows this with precision. Whatever you see most vividly and react to most strongly in others deserves a careful second reading. The sixth pattern of appearance is through the body. The body is a recording instrument of extraordinary fidelity. It holds what the mind has not yet processed and what the subconscious has not yet transmitted into language. Chronic tension in specific areas of the body, recurring physical symptoms that appear at consistent emotional moments, exhaustion that descends whenever a particular kind of demand is made. These are not merely medical events. They are the body speaking in the language of the mirror. Physical experience is not solely a reflection of inner state, and the archive does not reduce complex health situations to metaphor alone. But the body's consistent patterns deserve to be read alongside the emotional and circumstantial patterns, because all of them are speaking the same language from different registers. Timing is the seventh pattern form, and it is one of the most subtle. The pattern in timing refers not to what happens, but to when it consistently happens. Dreams that arrive before significant shifts, physical symptoms that appear when creative work is about to begin, financial difficulties that surface at the same phase of every project, relationship tensions that escalate at the same point in every new connection. The when of a pattern, tracked carefully over time, contains its own kind of message. It reveals the subconscious's relationship with a particular threshold. The moments just before change, the moments just before exposure. The moments when a new level of experience would require a deeper revision of identity. The eighth appearance is through what is consistently absent. The mirror does not only show you what keeps arriving, it shows you what never arrives, or what keeps almost arriving and then withdrawing. The relationship that keeps approaching and then retreating. The financial stability that comes close and then dissolves. The creative recognition that seems perpetually one step away. Absence is as informative as presence. What is systematically withheld is often precisely what the internal signal has been coded to regard as dangerous, overwhelming, or not belonging to someone like you. The ninth pattern of appearance is through contrast. Sometimes the mirror speaks most clearly not by showing the same thing over and over, but by showing you the precise opposite of what you believe you want. You insist that you desire deep connection, Yet the relationships that come are all defined by surface interaction. You insist that you want peace, yet conflict follows you from context to context. The contrast between stated desire and lived experience is one of the mirror's most revealing readings. It says, what you believe you want at the conscious level and what your identity level assumption has designated as yours are not aligned. Dreams, symbols, and synchronicities form the 10th and most esoteric layer of pattern appearance. When you are working with the mirror at depth, you will begin to notice that the symbolic world around you appears to comment on the inner process. Books fall open to relevant pages. A song plays on a day when its specific lyric is exactly what needs to be heard. Two separate conversations on the same day address the same theme from different angles. These are not proof of supernatural intervention. They are evidence of heightened attunement. When your attention is aligned with an internal signal that is active and seeking expression, you become more perceptive to external elements that carry a matching symbolic resonance. The universe does not plant these things. You perceive them because your field is tuned. The 11th appearance is in what you teach. The things a person most passionately teaches, warns against, or advocates for in others are frequently the things they are simultaneously working to understand in themselves. The teacher of boundaries who cannot enforce their own. The advocate for authenticity who performs a version of themselves for the world. The person who urgently advises everyone to rest who cannot permit themselves to stop. What you give others with the most intensity is often what you withhold from yourself most severely. The mirror sees this. It presents it through your relationships in the way others around you keep modeling precisely the behavior you most urge on them while you fail to claim it. The 12th appearance is through delay. Not all delay is a pattern signal, but delay that repeats specifically at identifiable emotional thresholds, at the approach of visibility, at the threshold of intimacy, at the moment before a new identity would need to be inhabited. Delay at these consistent points is a form of the mirror speaking. It is the signal saying, something in the architecture is not yet prepared to hold what is arriving. The delay is not punishment, it is calibration. But calibration requires something of the person experiencing it. It requires willingness to ask what is not yet ready, rather than simply resenting the delay for its surface inconvenience. Recognizing these 12 appearances is not a linear process. You will not work through them in sequence and arrive at the end with a clean diagnosis. The mirror presents its patterns in layers. You will recognize one form of appearance, and then, months later, recognize another that had been there all along but invisible. This is the nature of genuine inner work. It is not a problem to be solved in a single sitting. It is a language to be learned over time, with patience, with curiosity, and with a willingness to hold complexity without needing it to collapse into a simple verdict. Before this chamber closes, there is one more observation about how the pattern appears. It appears more clearly when you are quiet. The modern environment is designed with extraordinary efficiency to prevent the kind of inner quiet in which the mirror becomes readable. Noise, stimulation, distraction, constant information, all of these create the conditions in which the pattern remains invisible because the attention required to see it is perpetually fragmented. The practice of reading the mirror requires stillness, not the absence of activity, but the presence of a quality of attention that can observe without immediately reacting, interpreting, or explaining away what it sees. If you have ever felt that reality was trying to get your attention through a particular pattern, through a recurring feeling, a recurring type of person, a recurring circumstance, write the word signal in the comments. The archive wants to know how many readers have already been living inside the mirror's transmission without a name for what they were experiencing. The mirror pattern, once it is recognized in its external form, opens immediately into a deeper question. What does this pattern reveal about who I believe I am? Not who I say I am in my public narrative, not who I aspire to be in my ideal self-image, but who the deepest layer of my subconscious has designated as the true answer to the question of my identity. The first thing the mirror reveals, and perhaps the most foundational, is your belief about worth. Worth, in this context, does not mean moral value. It means the operating assumption about what you deserve to receive. This assumption is not usually articulated as a belief. It is experienced as a kind of permission field, an invisible boundary that determines how much love, how much recognition, how much abundance, how much ease, how much visibility you will allow yourself to receive before the subconscious begins to introduce interference. When the mirror shows you patterns of consistently receiving less than you desire, less recognition than you merit, less love than you offer, less financial return than your effort produces, it is pointing to the permission field. It is showing you the ceiling your worth assumption has installed. And that ceiling is not installed by the external world. It is installed by an internal conviction, formed usually very early in life, about the kind of person you are and the kind of treatment that is consistent with that kind of person. The second revelation is your belief about safety. Safety, in the language of the mirror, refers to the subconscious assessment of whether it is safe to be fully yourself in the world, whether it is safe to be seen in your power, whether it is safe to be seen in your vulnerability, whether it is safe to need things, to want things, to claim things. Many people carry an identity-level belief that full visibility is dangerous. This belief was formed in an environment where being fully visible produced pain. The subconscious, which is extraordinarily conservative in its protective functions, concluded that remaining partially hidden was the safest strategy. The mirror reveals this belief through patterns of proximity to the desired life without a rival. You are always almost there, always close to the breakthrough, but not through it. The pattern of almost is the safety belief protecting you from the exposure that full arrival would require. This is not a failure of effort. It is a deeply loyal act of protection that has outlived its original context. The subconscious is doing exactly what it was programmed to do. Reading the mirror does not condemn this. It offers the possibility of updating the program. The third revelation concerns your belief about love and the conditions under which it is available. Love beliefs are among the deepest and most consequential assumptions in the mirror system. They determine the relational field entirely. If the operating assumption about love is that it is conditional, that it must be earned through performance, that it is perpetually at risk of withdrawal, the relational patterns will consistently reflect this. Partners will be experienced as withholding. Affection will feel unreliable even when it is consistently offered. Closeness will produce anxiety rather than peace, because closeness is where the assumption says the threat of conditional withdrawal becomes most acute. The mirror shows love beliefs through the relational patterns described in earlier sections: the abandonment dynamic, the unavailability dynamic, the dynamic in which you give considerably more than you receive. Each of these is a love assumption showing its architecture. Reading it does not mean accepting it as permanent. It means finally understanding why the relational landscape keeps producing the same essential experience regardless of how many different people occupy it. The fourth revelation is about power, specifically your relationship with your own. The mirror reveals with striking precision how a person genuinely relates to their own power, not how they intellectually believe they relate to it, but how the identity layer has coded power as a concept. For some people, power is coded as something that must be earned through suffering. For others, it is coded as something that belongs to certain types of people and not to them. For others still, power is coded as something dangerous, something that, if claimed, will provoke punishment, isolation, or the withdrawal of love. The pattern in external authority dynamics, described earlier in the examples section, almost always traces back to this internal power coding. When you consistently encounter authority that is harsh, arbitrary, or withholding, the mirror is often pointing to a belief about power that says, power over you is the only kind that exists, that your own power is either absent or must remain subservient to maintain safety. Reading this revelation does not require anger at whoever installed the original coding. It requires the more difficult movement of deciding that the code can be rewritten. The fifth area of revelation is money and abundance. The mirror's reading of the financial pattern is extraordinarily specific and consistently traceable to an identity assumption. Not an assumption about money as an abstract concept, but an assumption about the kind of person you are in relation to money. Some people carry an identity that says money and spiritual depth are incompatible. Others carry one that says prosperity belongs to people who are different from them in some specific way, harder, luckier, more ruthless, more deserving. Others carry an identity that says abundance is always temporary, always about to be revoked. The financial mirror rarely reflects a single assumption. It reflects a layered set of them, which is why financial patterns can be so persistent even in people who have done considerable inner work. The surface layer is addressed. The deeper layer continues broadcasting. The protocol in this codex will eventually guide you into the deeper layer, but the recognition must come first. The question is not what your bank account contains. The question is what your identity assumes that balance means about who you are. The sixth revelation is about visibility. This is distinct from the safety belief, though they are closely related. Visibility refers specifically to your assumption about whether you are the kind of person whose presence registers, whose voice matters, whose contributions are seen and valued. Many people who experience chronic invisibility in their professional and personal lives are not actually invisible. They are emitting a signal that trains others to see them at a reduced level of attention. The signal is not intentional, but it is precise, and the people in their lives respond to the signal, not to the person they would be if the assumption were revised. What the visibility belief reveals about you is not your social skill or your communication style. It reveals whether you believe, at the level beneath language, that you have the right to take up space, to occupy the center of a room without apology, to have your presence treated as worthy of full attention. Many people discover, when they examine this belief honestly, that they have been performing a kind of preemptive diminishment. They make themselves smaller before others can make them small, because making themselves small first feels safer than risking the external diminishment that the old signal predicts as inevitable. The seventh revelation is about timing and readiness. The mirror reflects your assumption about when you are allowed to have what you desire. Some people carry a belief that they must fully prepare before anything good is permitted to arrive. They are perpetually in a state of not quite ready. The preparation is genuine, but it never concludes because the underlying assumption has decided that readiness is a threshold that cannot actually be crossed. The mirror shows this as patterns of perpetual preparation without arrival, of working towards something with great seriousness, but consistently stopping just before the final step. Others carry the opposite timing belief that they must act immediately or the opportunity will be destroyed. These people often move before the signal is clear, often in ways that undermine the very thing they are trying to create. Their mirror shows patterns of premature action and consequent collapse. Both timing beliefs are assumptions about the relationship between preparation and permission. Both are revisions that the protocol can address. The eighth revelation is perhaps the one that requires the most courage to look at: the belief about what you are capable of. The mirror reflects not only what you think you deserve, but what you believe you can do, hold, sustain, and become. Some people carry an inner ceiling on their own capability that has nothing to do with their actual capacity. This ceiling was often installed by a specific experience or a specific voice from an earlier part of life. And because it is installed at the identity level, it overrides evidence to the contrary. You can receive external validation of your capability and still not believe it, because the assumption says the validation is mistaken or temporary. The mirror reveals this through patterns where success arrives and then is somehow lost, undermined, or abandoned. The person engineers their own ceiling unconsciously, because to go beyond it would mean inhabiting an identity that the deep self has not yet authorized. Reading this revelation is not an invitation to shame. It is an invitation to recognize that the limits you are experiencing are not external walls. They are internal thresholds. And internal thresholds, unlike external walls, can be moved. The ninth revelation concerns the belief about change itself. Some people carry an assumption that change is dangerous, that it produces loss, that it requires the destruction of what exists before something new can form. This assumption produces a particular mirror pattern. The person who desires change deeply and consistently resists it equally deeply. They are pulled in two directions by two real forces. The conscious self desires a new experience. The identity-level self has coded change as the precondition of loss. Reading this in the mirror does not produce an easy resolution, but it produces an honest one. And honesty about the belief is the beginning of its revision. The mirror protocol, like every genuine tool, can be used incorrectly. And its misuse does not produce neutrality, it produces harm. The archive has an obligation to address this with precision, because a teaching that is applied without discernment becomes a trap. This section is dedicated to teaching you the difference between genuine mirror work and the distortions that impersonate it. The first and most common distortion is self-blame. Self-blame is not mirror work. It is mirror work performed without compassion, without nuance, and without the understanding that the function of the reflection is to illuminate, not to condemn. When a person uses the mirror principle to explain that they caused their own suffering through defective inner states, they have left the protocol entirely and entered a different activity: self-punishment. The mirror does not require you to conclude that you deserved what happened to you. It asks you to locate what was broadcasting so that the broadcast can be revised. Blame, whether directed outward or inward, is not a diagnostic function, it is an emotional reaction. The protocol requires the former and is disrupted by the latter. The second distortion is the weaponization of the mirror against others. This occurs when the principle is used not for self-examination, but for the examination of what other people must be reflecting. A person who uses the mirror protocol to diagnose the inner flaws of everyone around them while remaining entirely opaque to their own signal has inverted the tool completely. The glass book faces inward. It was never designed to be turned outward. When it is turned outward, it functions not as a mirror, but as a judgment. And judgment of others' inner states is not a metaphysical practice. It is a sophisticated avoidance of one's own. The third distortion is the erasure of external responsibility. The mirror principle does not mean that other people's behavior is not real, not harmful, and not worthy of being addressed directly. When someone in your life treats you with cruelty, manipulation, or violation, that behavior belongs to them. It is their responsibility. The mirror asks what signal was active before this person arrived, and whether the pattern of encountering this type of behavior has an internal root worth examining. It does not ask you to excuse the behavior, remain in its proximity, or forgive it on a timeline that is not yours. Reality has external agents who make their own choices. The mirror reveals what your internal state contributed to the encounter, not who is morally responsible for it. Spiritual bypassing is the fourth distortion, and it is one of the most culturally prevalent in communities that engage with metaphysical teachings. Spiritual bypassing occurs when a genuine insight is used to avoid the practical, grounded, and emotionally specific work that a situation requires. A person who says, "I know this is just a mirror of my inner state," while refusing to leave a harmful relationship, address a real financial emergency, or take practical steps toward a specific goal has converted the mirror protocol into a mechanism of avoidance. The teaching says, read the signal. It does not say, reading the signal replaces action. The fifth distortion is narcissistic interpretation, which is distinct from the self-blame pattern. Narcissistic interpretation of the mirror occurs when a person uses the principle to reinforce their sense of centrality in all events. Everything that happens becomes a message specifically designed for them. Every external event carries a hidden communication about their special journey. This interpretation feels spiritual, but it is, underneath, a form of self-inflation. The mirror is not a cosmically personalized performance. It is a feedback mechanism. Its feedback is precise, but it is not staged. Treating every life event as a cosmic drama in which you are the starring recipient of heavenly messages is not the same as reading genuine patterns with humility and discernment. The sixth distortion involves the confusion of anxiety with intuition. A person learning to work with the mirror may encounter an anxious feeling and interpret it as a genuine signal from reality. But anxiety is not always a message. Sometimes anxiety is the nervous system processing historical conditioning without reference to the present moment. The feeling of unease before an important meeting may be anxiety from old authority wounds, not a genuine signal that the meeting will go badly. The distinction matters enormously. Genuine intuitive signals tend to carry a quality of clarity beneath the feeling, a quiet knowing that does not require urgency. Anxiety carries urgency but not clarity. Learning to distinguish them is a practice in itself. The seventh distortion is premature closure. A person identifies a pattern, identifies an emotion, identifies a possible belief route, and then declares the work complete. They proceed as though the recognition alone constitutes the revision. But the recognition is only the first step of the protocol. Identifying that you carry a worthiness wound does not dissolve the wound. Understanding that your financial pattern reflects a scarcity assumption does not immediately reorganize your financial experience. The archive does not say this to discourage. It says it to prevent the distortion of treating insight as the end point rather than the beginning. The eighth distortion is the demand for immediate external confirmation. After working with the mirror and making genuine internal revisions, a person watches eagerly for the external world to confirm the change immediately. When it does not, they conclude that either the protocol is invalid or their inner work was insufficient. This impatience is understandable, but it is itself a signal worth reading. The demand for immediate external confirmation is often a residue of the original worthiness wound. The belief that the internal state is only valid if the external world immediately endorses it. The protocol does not operate on the timeline of impatience. It operates on the timeline of genuine revision, which is slower and deeper and far more durable than immediate confirmation. The ninth distortion is applying the mirror to genuinely external events without discernment. Not every difficult event is a mirror. Some events are natural disasters, systemic injustice, the deliberate actions of others, illnesses with clear physiological causes, accidents, economic forces. The mirror principle operates within a specific domain of experience, namely the domain of repeated personal patterns. It does not claim dominion over all events. A person who attempts to apply mirror logic to every external event they encounter, including those that are clearly systemic or situational rather than personal and patterned, will exhaust themselves and distort the teaching. The protocol asks for discernment. Apply it where patterns repeat. Do not apply it indiscriminately. The 10th distortion is the use of the mirror as a reason to avoid necessary boundaries. The idea that another person's harmful behavior is a reflection of an inner state must never be interpreted as meaning that the appropriate response is to remain near the harmful behavior in order to do inner work. Inner work can be done from a safe distance. The boundary is not a denial of the mirror. It is a precondition for the kind of grounded, unhurried inner examination that genuine mirror work requires. Protecting yourself from harm is not a failure of spiritual sophistication. It is the first protocol. The glass book is a tool for the living. It was not written to justify proximity to what destroys. The mirror protocol is a 6-movement practice. Each movement builds on the one before it, and the sequence matters. Moving out of sequence is one of the most common errors in applying this work. The archive presents it here in precise order, with care for what each movement actually requires. The first movement is observation. Before any interpretation can be accurate, the pattern must be observed with a degree of precision that most people never apply. This means stepping back from the emotional heat of the immediate event and asking a very specific question. What is the repeated theme? Not what happened in this specific instance, but what kind of thing keeps happening. What category of experience keeps returning? What emotional signature keeps arriving through different costumes? Observation is not yet analysis. It is not yet meaning-making. It is the act of a careful archivist cataloging what is actually present in the record before drawing any conclusions. To observe well, you need time and stillness. You need to look back across a meaningful span of experience, not just the last few weeks, but months and years. You are looking for the pattern that transcends the specific event. You are looking for the thread that runs through what appeared to be isolated incidents. This requires you to hold multiple memories simultaneously without rushing them into a narrative that explains them away. Observation is the act of letting the pattern speak before you tell it what it means. The second movement is naming the emotion. Once the pattern is observed in its external form, the protocol directs attention toward the internal emotional signature it consistently produces. Not the emotion you feel in retrospect when you analyze it calmly, but the emotion that is present in the body in the moment the pattern activates. Name it with precision. Not just bad or stressed, but the specific quality of the feeling. Is it smallness, humiliation, a particular kind of hunger, the feeling of being erased, the feeling of being trapped, grief, quiet rage? The precise name matters because the emotion is the bridge between the external pattern and the internal assumption. Naming the emotion is a practice that requires patience because the tendency of the mind under emotional activation is to move immediately into narrative, into explanation, into the story of what happened and who is responsible. The protocol asks you to pause that movement, to sit with the feeling before following the thought, to let the emotion be present as a sensation and a signal rather than immediately converting it into a grievance or a justification. This pause is where the mirror begins to become readable. The third movement is formulating the question. This is the movement that most clearly distinguishes the mirror protocol from ordinary self-reflection. Once the emotion is named, you ask a very specific question. What would I have to believe about myself or about reality for this emotional experience to feel inevitable? Not what is wrong with the situation, not what is wrong with the other person, not what is wrong with you, but what operating assumption, what deeply embedded belief about the nature of the self or the world would make this outcome the natural and expected result? This question is not rhetorical. It is genuinely investigative, and it should be held with the patience of genuine inquiry, not the urgency of someone who wants a quick answer they can use to close the investigation. The assumption you are looking for is usually not immediately visible. It does not present itself with a label. It presents itself as a sensation of recognition when the right question illuminates it. You are looking for the belief that has been so thoroughly normalized that it stopped presenting itself as a belief and began presenting itself as a fact about life. The fourth movement is locating the original signal. Once the operating assumption has become visible, the protocol asks you to trace it, not necessarily to a specific childhood event, though that is often where the root is located, but to the original context in which this assumption made sense, in which it was, in fact, a reasonable and even necessary adaptation to the environment. A child who learned that being seen meant being criticized formed a reasonable assumption. Visibility is dangerous. That assumption made sense then. The environment confirmed it. The subconscious recorded it as a survival protocol. Locating the original signal is not an excavation of blame toward the people who populated that original environment. It is an act of compassion toward the self that formed the assumption under conditions it did not choose. The child who decided that they were not safe to be seen did so in order to survive. The adult who still broadcasts that signal does not need condemnation. They need the recognition that the survival protocol has become a limitation and that the original context that required it no longer governs the present situation. The fifth movement is the revision. This is the most delicate and most important movement of the protocol, and it is the one most frequently misunderstood. Revision is not the act of replacing a negative belief with a positive one at the level of language. It is not the affirmation method, though affirmation can play a supporting role when applied with precision. Revision is the act of imagining, inhabiting, and emotionally rehearsing a new identity assumption until the subconscious accepts it as a definition rather than as an aspiration. The language of revision must be specific to the original assumption. If the original assumption is, "I am not safe to be fully seen," the revision is not. "I am completely safe everywhere." That is too broad, too abstract, and too distant from the specific emotional wound to land at the identity level. A more effective revision is something closer to, "Being seen has produced evidence of my strength, not only evidence of my risk." The revision must reference the original assumption and offer a credible alternative that the subconscious can inhabit, not a generic positive statement that floats above the wound without touching it. Revision is practiced through what the archive calls identity dwelling. This is the act of spending conscious, unhurried time inhabiting the assumption from its revised position, not visualizing a specific external outcome, not picturing a particular scene of success or love or abundance, but dwelling inside the feeling state that would naturally belong to a person who held the revised assumption as their ground truth. What would your body feel like if you genuinely believed you were safe to be seen? Not what would you achieve. What would your body feel like? What would your breathing be like? How would you hold yourself in a room? That embodied state is the revised signal. That is what you are encoding. The sixth movement is observation of the feedback. After the revision practice has been engaged with genuine consistency, typically over a period of weeks rather than days, the protocol asks you to return your attention to the external pattern and observe whether it is beginning to shift, not to demand that it shift immediately, not to scan anxiously for evidence, but to notice, with the same quality of calm observation that opened the protocol, whether the emotional signature of repeated experiences is changing. Changes often appear first in subtle ways. A conversation that would have previously produced the old emotional signature passes without it. An encounter with someone who represents the recurring character type does not land with the usual weight. A financial experience that would previously have activated the scarcity signal arrives and is met with a groundedness that was not accessible before. These subtle shifts are the first transmissions from the revised signal. They are to be noted with gratitude, but not seized upon as proof, because proof-seeking is a function of impatience, and impatience is the old signal reasserting itself. The protocol does not end at the sixth movement, it cycles. Each time the revised signal encounters a new external situation, there may be a new layer of the original assumption that becomes visible. The first revision may address the surface layer of the belief. Deeper layers may require subsequent cycles of the protocol. This is not evidence of failure, it is evidence of depth. The subconscious is a layered structure. Its revision is a progressive process, not a single event. There's an ancillary practice within the mirror protocol that the archive calls the nightly review. At the end of each day, spend a brief period of quiet, reviewing the emotional signatures of the day's encounters. not to analyze or judge them, simply to notice which moments produced the old signal, which moments felt like the revised signal, and whether any new pattern elements appeared that deserve attention. The nightly review keeps the mirror in active use rather than treating the protocol as a periodic event. There is also the practice of what the archive calls symbolic notation. When a significant mirror event occurs, whether it is a recognition of the pattern, an encounter with the recurring character type, or a moment in which the revised signal visibly produced a different quality of experience, write it down. Not in the form of analysis, in the form of notation. Date. Brief description of the external event. Emotional signature. What the mirror showed. This notation practice serves two functions. It makes the pattern more visible over time, and it begins to create an archive of your own signal's revision, which becomes evidence, not demanded from the external world, but recorded from within the internal one. The protocol also includes what might be called the compassion anchor. Before any session of mirror work, before any attempt to locate and revise an assumption, the protocol asks you to spend a moment in an explicit act of compassion toward the self that formed the original assumption. This is not sentimentality. It is a functional requirement. The nervous system, when it perceives threat, contracts. If mirror work is approached with self-judgment, the nervous system registers the approach as an attack and makes the deeper layers of assumption inaccessible. When the approach is anchored in genuine compassion, the nervous system relaxes sufficiently to allow the deeper investigation to proceed. The compassion anchor is not an emotional warm-up. It is a security protocol. Finally, the protocol includes a practice of environmental calibration. As the internal signal revises, the external environment often needs to be deliberately adjusted to support the new frequency. This does not mean dramatic life changes made impulsively. It means thoughtful, grounded adjustments to the inputs your attention receives daily. The voices you spend time with, the environments you inhabit, the content you absorb. These are not merely personal preferences. They are signal inputs that continuously broadcast into your subconscious and either support or undermine the revision in progress. Calibrating the environment is not a peripheral activity. It is a foundational one. The mirror protocol in its 6 movements, accompanied by the nightly review, symbolic notation, compassion anchor, and environmental calibration, forms a complete practice, not a perfect practice, not a practice that guarantees specific external outcomes on a specific timeline, but a practice that, applied with consistency and genuine honesty, progressively brings the internal signal into alignment with what you genuinely desire to experience. And as the signal aligns, the reflection changes. Not because the world has been forced to comply, because the broadcast has finally changed what it sends. The first mistake is making the protocol an instrument of punishment. This is the most common single error in mirror work, and it is destructive enough to undermine the entire practice. When the mirror shows you a pattern that you do not want to see, the trained response is curiosity. The untrained response is guilt. And guilt, unlike curiosity, does not lead deeper into the pattern. It loops on the surface, repeatedly confirming the unworthiness assumption rather than revising it. If you find yourself using the mirror to build a case against yourself, you have left the protocol. Return to the compassion anchor and begin again. The second mistake is confusing revision with repression. Some people encounter the instruction to shift the inner signal and interpret it as an instruction to suppress what is genuinely felt. They decide that feeling fear, grief, frustration, or doubt is evidence that the signal is not being correctly managed. They attempt to force the feeling down and replace it with a performed positivity. This is not revision. This is the suppression of the very signal that the protocol requires you to read. The feelings are not the problem. They are the diagnostics. Repressing them removes the information before it can be used. The third mistake is seeking external proof before the internal revision is complete. The moment a person makes any internal adjustment, a part of the mind immediately scans the external environment for evidence that the adjustment worked. This scanning is understandable, but it is premature and counterproductive. It introduces a quality of anxious watching that is itself a signal broadcasting from the old frequency, specifically from the belief that your inner state is only valid if it immediately produces external results. The protocol requires sustained internal revision before external observation becomes a meaningful signal. The fourth mistake is applying the protocol to other people on their behalf. When someone in your life is experiencing a difficult pattern, it can be tempting to identify what mirror dynamic is producing their experience and to share this insight with them. In most cases, this is not received as help. It is received as judgment. The mirror protocol is a deeply personal practice. It cannot be performed for another person, and it cannot be imposed on them. You can model the practice through your own transformation. You cannot perform it on someone who has not chosen it. The fifth mistake is treating the protocol as a replacement for practical action. The mirror reveals the internal signal that shapes the quality of your experience. It does not replace the actions required to navigate the physical world. When a financial pattern is traced to a scarcity assumption and that assumption begins to be revised, the revision does not replace budgeting, income generation, or financial planning. The inner work and the outer action belong together. To use the protocol as a reason to avoid practical engagement with the world is a sophisticated form of spiritual bypassing already described in the distortion section, but it bears repeating in the context of mistakes because it is so prevalent. The sixth mistake is expecting the protocol to eliminate all difficulty. Some people approach the mirror protocol with the hope that once they revise their internal assumptions, their life will become frictionless. This is not what the protocol promises. It promises a readable life, not a frictionless one. External events will continue to include difficulty, loss, uncertainty, and conflict. But the quality of your relationship to those events will change. And that change in relationship changes everything, not by removing the difficulty, but by transforming its meaning from something happening to you into something you can read, navigate, and learn from. The seventh mistake is inconsistency disguised as intuition. A person begins the mirror protocol and practices it seriously for several days. Then, they encounter a particularly uncomfortable reflection and they stop, reasoning that they have learned what was needed for now. Then they begin again, then stop again. This cycling in and out of the protocol is not intuition. It is resistance dressed in the language of discernment. Genuine intuition might occasionally suggest a pause in certain kinds of inner work for rest or integration. But the chronic interruption of the protocol every time a difficult reflection appears is the old assumption defending its territory. The eighth mistake is demanding that the people in your life change in response to your inner revision and then treating their failure to change as evidence that the protocol does not work. Other people have their own signals, their own subconscious assumptions, and their own timelines. Your internal revision changes the signal you broadcast. It does not override the autonomy of others. Some relationships will respond to your revised signal and transform. Some will not. Some will exit your life entirely because they were configured for the old frequency and cannot find their resonance with the new one. None of this is a failure of the protocol. It is the protocol operating with precision. The ninth mistake is treating every emotional reaction as a mirror event requiring immediate analysis. Not every emotion is a pattern signal. Sometimes a feeling is a response to a genuinely present moment event that does not require archaeological excavation. The protocol asks for selective and discerning application, specifically to patterns that repeat. Applying it to every moment of ordinary emotional life turns the practice into an exhausting performance of perpetual self-surveillance. Rest is part of the protocol. Ordinary living is part of the protocol. Not every feeling is a transmission that demands immediate decoding. The 10th mistake is operating the protocol from shame rather than from sovereignty. Shame asks, "What is wrong with me that this keeps happening?" Sovereignty asks, "What is active in me that I can understand and revise?" These two questions, though they appear similar, produce entirely different internal states. Shame contracts the nervous system and makes the deeper assumption layers inaccessible. Sovereignty creates a quality of grounded openness, in which the deeper layers can be examined without triggering the protective mechanisms that make revision impossible. The entire protocol must be operated from sovereignty. If shame is the operating state, the first task is to address the shame before the mirror work can proceed. When the mirror protocol has been applied with genuine consistency to the more obvious patterns of daily life, it becomes available for use in the deeper and more complex territories of experience. This section addresses those territories with precision and with an understanding that the protocol applies differently in different domains, not because the principle changes, but because the assumptions that operate in different areas of life are layered in ways that require domain-specific reading. In intimate relationships, the mirror operates with its most intimate and its most challenging precision. The person you have chosen to be closest to, or the person you keep choosing in different faces, is almost always a precise reflection of the most active combination of assumptions you carry about love, worth, safety, and visibility. This does not mean your partner is a projection and not a real person. It means that the specific qualities that drew you to them, and the specific dynamics that most consistently repeat in the relationship, are transmissions worth reading. The advanced application of the mirror in relationships requires the willingness to ask not only what this person reflects about my old assumptions, but also what this relationship is inviting me to become. In the domain of money and financial experience, the mirror protocol at the advanced level reveals not merely a single scarcity assumption, but a complete architecture of beliefs about value, exchange, deservingness, and identity. The advanced practitioner learns to read their financial pattern not only in terms of what arrives and what is withheld, but in terms of the quality of their relationship with money in ordinary moments, how they experience spending, how they receive unexpected financial shifts, what emotional state accompanies financial planning, and whether the act of investing in themselves or their work feels natural or produces an internal resistance that deserves examination. For those who create work intended to be seen by others, whether that is art, writing, music, business, or any other form of public expression, The mirror protocol reveals the precise assumptions that are shaping the reception of that work, not the taste of the audience, not the algorithm, but the internal signal that is present when the work is produced and when it is released. A creator who completes work from a place of deep assumption that they will not be received will produce work that broadcasts that assumption subtly and consistently in the way they present it, the language they use to describe it, the quality of attention they invest in making it available, and the willingness with which they stand behind it. In the area of audience growth and public influence, the mirror principle is extraordinarily precise. The signal of a creator or public communicator is not only in the content they produce, it is in the entirety of how they inhabit their role. Whether they speak from the assumption of being worth listening to, whether they communicate with the expectation of genuine reception, whether their internal posture toward their audience is one of gift or performance. And an audience receives the signal beneath the content. They respond to the frequency of the communicator's deepest assumption, not only to the words. Creative blocks, addressed briefly in the earlier examples section, carry a mirror application that becomes rich and complex at the advanced level. The block is almost never about the creative work itself. It is about what the completion and release of the work would require the creator to become. It would require them to inhabit a new identity. The person who finishes, the person who releases, the person whose work exists in the world without their protection, the person who has allowed themselves to be fully seen in their creative intelligence. The advanced application of the mirror to creative blocks works directly with the identity revision required for completion, not with the content of what is being created. In the territory of spiritual timing and the interpretation of signs, the mirror protocol introduces a crucial refinement, the distinction between genuine synchronicity and confirmation bias. Genuine synchronicity, as the archive understands it, is a moment of meaningful coincidence between an internal signal and an external event, perceived with a quality of calm recognition rather than urgent proof-seeking. Confirmation bias, which is one of the mirror's most seductive distortions in the spiritual domain, involves selectively noticing external events that confirm a desired conclusion while being blind to events that contradict it. The advanced practitioner learns to notice the quality of their attention when they perceive a synchronicity. Is the recognition arriving with stillness or with the slightly feverish urgency of someone who needs the universe to confirm what they have already decided? The mirror protocol applied to the theme of identity transformation at the deepest level reveals something the archive calls the identity gap. The identity gap is the distance between the self that currently broadcasts and the self that would be required to inhabit the desired life. Most people experience this gap as a destination to travel toward. The advanced practitioner learns to experience it differently, as a layer of the self that already exists but has not yet been given permission to express. The gap is not a journey across empty space. It is a threshold that requires a revision of permission rather than an accumulation of evidence. Long-term integration of the mirror protocol produces what might be called pattern literacy, a fluency in reading the language of your own life that becomes increasingly automatic over time. In the early stages of the practice, reading the mirror requires deliberate effort, conscious questioning, and active protocol engagement. After sustained practice, the mirror becomes a natural companion to ordinary awareness. Patterns are recognized earlier. Assumptions are located with less excavation. The revised signal stabilizes, and the external environment reorganizes around it, not overnight, but over the arc of genuine, sustained inner work. Pattern literacy is not enlightenment. It is a practical intelligence acquired through honest practice that makes the experience of being alive dramatically more navigable. You have been in this chamber before. At the beginning of this codex, there was a book in the third library whose cover was made of black glass. Most readers who found it closed it immediately. They came for a secret. They were shown a reflection instead. They mistook the reflection for an accusation and withdrew before the mirror could complete its message. That was the first page of this record. You are now standing at the last one. The glass book is still open, but the person reading it now is not the same person who first arrived at its threshold. That person believed the external world was separate from the internal one. That person experienced their recurring patterns as punishments or accidents. That person looked into every difficult relationship, every financial strain, every repeating conflict, and saw the world happening to them. You carry those memories, but you also carry something they did not: a language, a way of reading what was always already there. The mirror has not changed. The world outside has not yet fully reorganized itself, because real reorganization takes the time that genuine depth requires. But your relationship to what appears in the mirror has changed. When the pattern arrives now, there is a moment, however brief, in which you do not immediately disappear into the story of what happened. There is a pause. In that pause, the mirror becomes readable. And a readable mirror is not a thing to fear. It is a navigation instrument. It is the glass book doing precisely what it was placed in this archive to do. The deepest promise of this codex was not that your life would become easier. It was that it would become readable. And a readable life is one in which nothing that happens is entirely without meaning, not because the universe has staged events for your benefit, but because your attention has learned to find signal where others find only noise. You have learned to distinguish the pattern from the incident, the emotion from the story, the assumption from the fact, the revision from the performance. These distinctions are not trivial. They are the architecture of a fundamentally different relationship with your own existence. The glass book will continue to be here. In the quiet moments, in the difficult encounters, in the patterns you have already revised and the ones you have not yet seen clearly, it will be present. Some days the reflection will be clear and still and recognizable. Other days it will be distorted, as the candlelight was in the very first moment you arrived, with shapes you cannot quite make out and faces you are not yet ready to examine. On those days, do not close the book. Simply let it stay open. The mirror works even when you are not actively reading it. The signal continues to move. The revision continues to deepen. Patience is not passivity. It is the practiced act of staying present with a process that operates on a timeline deeper than urgency. There is one final thing the archive wants to leave with you, and it is this. The moment you can look into the glass book without the impulse to close it, you have already crossed a threshold that most people never cross. Not because they lack intelligence or spiritual capacity, but because the mirror requires something that is rarely taught: the willingness to be accountable without being condemned, to locate your signal without erasing your humanity, to revise your assumptions without losing the compassion for the self that formed them. You have demonstrated that willingness by arriving here and remaining until the final page. That is not nothing. In the archive's estimation, that is everything. If this codex found you at the right moment, Keep it close. Return to it when the signs become difficult to read, when the pattern returns wearing a new costume, when you lose the thread between the inner world and the outer one, and need to find the corridor between them again. The third library holds more than one codex. Each one was placed here for exactly the reader who finds it. Subscribe if this language is one you have been waiting to hear. There are more chambers, more archives, more mirrors waiting to show you what you are ready, finally, to see.